started with our panel today. It's a bit of a continuation from last week in the sense of we're talking about issues that come up as a vegan living in a non-vegan world, right? So last week we talked about social events and how to prepare for restaurants and things like that. Today we're going to talk about questions that you might get that vegans often face when they're out and about in the world. Because a lot of people are less familiar, some people might get a little defensive, others are just plain curious. And so it's nice to have some people who've been vegan for a little while share their ideas on how to answer these questions. So again, I'm Deanna, and I just want to thank everyone for coming today. I hope you're enjoying all the food everyone is sharing. I made the little wrap-up things if you're curious. And yeah, I'll just start with a little introduction. We have 4 amazing people here today that are going to share their thoughts and ideas. And I'll start by introducing the wonderful person on the end, and this is K.R. Vargas. Did I say that right? Great. K.R. serves as the executive director of La Raza for Liberation. Kara was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area by a single mom from the Andean region of South America. I've been there, it's beautiful. Kara has a degree in speech communication from Ithaca College in New York and is also certified in plant-based nutrition from the T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies. They have over 10 years of public speaking experience, traveled across the U.S. and overseas, working in community development, conflict resolution, homelessness, domestic abuse, mass incarceration, and animal rights. And currently, KR lives here in Philadelphia. What a bonus to our community. Next, we have Shay. Shay Mosley is a motivational speaker, a wellness enthusiast, and social justice advocate. She's been on her journey as a vegan for 7 years and is dedicated to educating and empowering others to find optimal health and healing through lifestyle change and holistic healing practices. Also a great bonus to our community.
Thank you.
Haji Schreffler, did I say that right? Is the Director of Programs for Drexel Study Abroad, so just across the Schuylkill, where she has worked for over 15 years developing international programs around the world. She's also the founder and president of We the Village, a grassroots nonprofit that supports orphan children in Haiti. Haji was raised as a vegetarian, amazing, and shifted to a vegan diet 2.5 years ago. Another great bonus. And then the last amazing bonus to our community is Lauren Brown. Lauren Brown's been vegan for 6 years, right? And is also the founder of the Prepping Vegan. I'm going to let her tell you how to find that real quick before we move on.
I do meal preps for people, and you can find me on Facebook or Instagram at The Prepping Vegan.
Excellent. So, welcome. Thank you so much. You are all wonderful for being here and sharing your time and your thoughts to all of our 30-day vegan pledges. This is our last meeting, so after today, they face the world as hopefully continuing their vegan journey, and the answers that you provide to these questions will be very, very helpful. So the first question is, this isn't necessarily part of the topic, but it's always really helpful, is what inspired you to go vegan and when did that happen? And anyone who'd like to go first?
So I went on a health journey, health period, had nothing to do with veganism in 2011. I joined a well-known weight loss program. I had no idea, I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired and fat. And I joined it, didn't know how I would do, didn't really know anything about it. 2 years later, I had lost probably 50 to 75 pounds, and I needed to take it to the next level because I was hitting a lot of plateaus, even though I was working out. I had a friend from high school that had gone vegan, so I had been doing meatless Mondays, and I was like, I was good with it. And then one day I just said, I'm done, that's it. And literally I prepped like my mom did. So I had, you buy the big packs of some dead animal and break it down and put it in your freezer so when it's on sale. So I literally opened it, had friends come get it, and I was done. June 1st, 2013.
Next.
Are we all, okay.
Please.
So I was raised vegetarian, which thank you, Mom, for that one. And so for me, it was New Year's Day, 2017, and so my son actually went vegan a year before I did. He grew up vegetarian with me and then eating meat with his dad. And he came home one day, he said, I'm going vegan, and I did not believe him because he loved all parts of the animal when he was with his father. And he, week went by, 2 weeks went by, 3 weeks went by, and I'm like, he's really serious about it. He went cold turkey. And I'm like, he told me it was after watching this documentary. He said, you have to watch it, you have to watch it. So I knew, and it was Cowspiracy. And I never ate, I didn't grow up eating meat. And I knew once I watched it after seeing the effect it had on him that I would turn to a plant-based diet. So I wasn't quite ready at that moment, and I said, all right, I will start on New Year's Day, because I know once I watch it, it's going to be a wrap for me, and that's exactly what happened. The environmental, I could no longer, even though I wasn't eating meat, it was dairy and egg, I could no longer justify buying a pack of cheese, which I loved cheese. It was like a food group for me. I just couldn't justify doing that, knowing that each pack of cheese, the land resources, the environmental destruction, all of it, the abuse, everything, it just I could no longer not know that, and for me that was it. It was the environmental impact, and the animal rights and the animal suffering for me really go hand in hand with that. But the thing that was like, I'm done, it was the environmental impact.
And it's always going to be a progression. Some people go vegan. Like I went for health initially, but now more than ever, it's about the animals and the environment.
Yeah.
The health kind of took care of itself, so I don't really worry about that aspect anymore. So now it's about the animals, but I didn't go into it for that reason. It developed over time.
I think that's exactly right. I have to say the same thing for me. Mine just basically started I'm from the South originally. I didn't get to mention that in my introduction, so I was born in Memphis, Tennessee.
I can't tell that.
I was born in Memphis, Tennessee, and then my dad moved us from Memphis to Dallas, Texas. So, of course, you're talking about barbecue and pork chops and fried chicken and all of those things. It's kind of, was part of it. But as I started getting older and noticing that all of my loved ones, the people that were dear to me, I was losing them to disease that was simply caused by lifestyle, so diabetes, cholesterol issues, high blood pressure, things of that nature. So I was like, okay, this is kind of scary, and then being told that, well, you're predisposed to this, and I'm always a person I challenge. So I was like, let me find out, am I really predisposed? Is there something I can do about this? So I challenged myself because I just did not want to be another person in my family to suffer. And it was like you said, Lauren, it started off that way with health and just wanting to, to do better and feel better. Then I started watching the documentaries like we all do, and that just added to it. And it's like you were just saying, it got to a point where it was extremely uncomfortable for me to even do something as simple as cook breakfast for my mom, trying to scramble eggs. I would get sick. So I said, you know what? I'm done. So my journey, like I said, it's been about 7 years, but for me, I felt like it was necessary. Like, how could I truly say that I loved Earth, that I, respected everything that lived, but yet, I'm participating in something that's truly stating the opposite. So, 7 years ago.
So for me, I come from like a human rights background. So at the time, I was working at a women's homeless shelter in San Francisco. And a friend of mine started talking to me about the environmental aspect, the amount of resources that it takes to, produce and sell these foods. And so what struck me about that information was like knowing that there's, like 1 billion hungry people in the world that I was directly working with, and knowing that there's like animals being overfed, right? Because, I'm sorry, I'm tapping the table. I was told not to do that. I talk a lot with my hands. And so, knowing that these animals were being overfed because we sell them by the pound, right? That, it was very similar. It's just after knowing that, I couldn't not know that anymore. So it just felt like I was working against myself just in my personal life, and that was really kind of a very eye-opening moment for me, realizing how being in a quote-unquote first world country, how closely tied our consumption is to all of these different oppressions, whether it's humans or non-human animals.
And how long have you been vegan?
Oh, for a little over 4 years now.
I totally agree. I'm so happy to see all the people of color in the room. We're predisposed to a lot of the heart disease, high blood pressures, and those types of things. So adopting a vegan diet almost eliminates that. Some of it you can't eliminate. I have vegan friends that are on cholesterol meds. Some of it's genetics, but we can do what's in our power to fight some of those things. I look at my family history too. I have a mom that has had breast cancer. Her sister had breast cancer. I had a grandfather that died basically of all the illnesses that morbid obesity cause. So I'm so glad that we as a population are taking control of what we can in the best way that we can.
Yes.
So, knowing that, what do you see as the biggest challenge that you face as a vegan in a non-vegan world, and what do you do to overcome that challenge?
I have a huge lunch bag I carry everywhere. People expect it when I come to their house. Because I do food prep, and I food prep for myself once a week on Sundays, so that I work 3 jobs, I have 2 dogs, I have 72 plants, there's a lot going on. So if I work out 3 or 4 nights a week, so if I don't do that, I'll stop at diner so-and-so and get whatever. Vegan, of course, but get whatever. And I can't do that all the time, it's just not healthy. And nobody told me this when I became vegan. Just because it's vegan doesn't mean it's not healthy, that it's healthy. We can get pizza and cheesesteaks and cakes and cookies, and we still shouldn't be doing that every day just because it's vegan. The sugar causes disease in our bodies, so we should still try to cut down on that. But it is better than eating the eggs and the milk also. Where was I going with that?
I think you were saying your biggest challenge was making sure you had food available. So
Always.
You bring it with you as your
Always.
solution.
People know, hey, where's your purple bag? Where's your blue bag? They know that I'm coming. I'm the cheapest house guest ever because I don't eat your food.
Right.
I just show up with my same personality.
Right.
Anyone else?
I think the biggest challenge, I hope I'm answering this correctly, because my challenge is not so much my challenge, but it's a challenge in terms of trying to educate others. Again, piggybacking when we're talking about communities of color, and just people in general. When you've done something for so long, that's your way of doing it, and it's really hard to try to tell folks about some alternative measures. So for me, that is the challenge, getting people to understand that you do have power over your health. Somebody says, oh, I can't live without my meat. Yes, you can. I can't live without my sugar. Yes, you can. And so it's just a matter of just like every other habit that we have, that we've had to unlearn. It's kind of the same thing. So for me, it's just being able to convince people that, you can be vegan, you won't starve to death, the food is going to be good. It's just so many things that people come at you with, but then also understanding that I was that person also, and that's one thing that keeps me grounded. I ate everything. I didn't want a salad. Don't come to me talking about low fat, low this. No, I want everything. So, I was that person. So I think now the challenge, like Lauren was saying, is understanding that once we've learned, now it's a necessity for people to be educated. It's no longer just about the trend or the fad, but folks are dying. People are taking way more prescriptions than they really have to. Your energy is low. You have mental fog. And what happens is you go to the doctor, and what do? They give you another script. Instead of saying, why don't you stop eating this? Why don't you try doing that? So, but because we're so used to trusting doctors and trusting society versus ourselves, then it's like, well, I don't know if this is true. I can't heal myself. Forgetting that this is the way it once was before we got into some of the practices that we're doing now. So I think for me, just getting people to just kind of reverse engineer the way we do things. And I understand that it's a challenge, but it's one that I welcome. But it is a reality for folks like us who are trying to educate people who just haven't been in it. They haven't done human rights work or animal rights work and just not very familiar. It definitely is something I think it's a good challenge to have, but it is a reality when you're just communicating with people about this lifestyle.
Yeah, I agree. I think the most challenging aspect is actually the social aspect, funnily enough. You know, you can get into the habit of, cooking differently, shopping differently, but talking to people, that's where it gets tricky. And yeah, I find the same thing. It's there's a lot of this information, we were never taught, and that was very much done on purpose, right? People can't liberate themselves if they don't even know what the actual problem is. So yeah, it's really just like being patient and remembering that we've all been there. A lot of this information can sound also very unbelievable because it is so, quite frankly, just disgusting and shocking that this is being done to us. We're very much being poisoned from the inside. So it's a lot for people to take in. And I think just remembering to be patient with folks. And flexible too, like you said, it is a journey. It's not something that everyone can just do overnight. I was able to do it overnight, but that's a lot because of a lot of the privileges that I have. So just keeping that in mind when you're discussing. And I find it helps too to also always have that disclaimer, like even when people ask you like, why did you go vegan, or why are you eating this way? I like to say like, well, maybe we should wait till after we're done eating, or, because I'll really go into it. But, if we can't wait till after, or even then too, I'll also say like, this is why, you're asking me why I did this. So I just want to be clear that like, I'm not trying to say you should do this or have to do this. I want to just answer your question, and really making that clear, because it really is easy for folks to become very defensive because they feel like they're being attacked. And so just kind of really coming in with that compassion.
I think most of the vegans I know, for their first year of veganism, they were that person that you hate, that you want to run away from, that you have to go vegan, you can't eat that, you can't eat this. And now my philosophy is, what you eat doesn't feed me, and I can only do the best that I can do. If you get bogged down with what everyone else is doing around you, you'll be very lonely, very sad, very angry all the time, and all those things aren't healthy either. So I do the best that I can do, and I've helped few people go vegan. The best thing I can tell you is lead by example for those around you, and they will come to you. Unfortunately, it's usually when something happens. They find out they have high blood pressure or high cholesterol or whatever, and that's when they usually come to you. But I've had those come to me that just wanted to lose a couple pounds, and they like, oh my gosh, I feel great, and it stuck. So being that person that people want to run away from now that you're vegan isn't going to help us change others around us. We have to, and that's all I can say is lead by example, and that's different for every person, but that's what I try to do.
And I'll add one thing. I agree with everything in terms of the challenges. One thing I'll add to what's been said already is knowing yourself and being prepared for circumstances where, at least I, in the beginning, kind of overestimated my own ability to be in a situation and not have prepared for that situation, like a social, like kind of food situation, or cravings that I might have. I know that I like having, for example, like a sweet, a dessert or something after my dinner. And in the beginning, I was just lazy and didn't really feel like looking for a vegan option for that. So I wasn't realistic with myself in terms of knowing what my cravings were. And I grew up on a whole foods type of diet, so junk food really was never part of my diet. But certain things that if you feel like you're gonna crave a slice of pizza, or you're going to crave a piece of chocolate, or you're going to crave cheese, then don't wait until you're in a social setting where there's chocolate, cheese, and all those things, and then you feel very weak and maybe give into that temptation. Like, be able to kind of serve your own cravings or things that you know you're going to want without being in that situation of not being prepared.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. And actually, I want to add one thing in terms of the influence. So back to my son and his dad. So my son, it was one of those things, keep the peace. I'm not going to, I grew up vegetarian. My son was vegetarian in my house. I never tried to, tell his dad what to feed him. My son is 25. Yes, I have a 25-year-old. My son's father.
I was trying to do math in my head.
Yeah.
Wasn't working out.
Typical, really crappy African-American diet. Okay. very resistant to anything remotely close to taking meat away. Well, my son, after all these years, his father and his wife have been vegetarian for 3 years. And it wasn't because my son or me was like preaching at him or trying, it's just influence. Cooking meals for people, inviting people over to taste delicious food. And I've had so many friends that I haven't said anything to, and they just, by being around me, by tasting how delicious the foods can be, and by letting them ask the questions, I've had so many friends, maybe they're not vegan, but have gone vegetarian. I just had a friend yesterday email me and say, I'm at 85% vegetarian because of, kind of seeing what you're doing. So the influence can be very strong, even if you're not actively talking about it. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. So to move into the common questions we hear as vegans in a non-vegan world, one of the most popular questions seems to be, where do you get your protein? So how do each of you respond to that question? I'm sure it's a little different for everybody.
I usually say that everything you eat has protein in it, and protein's the last thing you need to worry about. And do I look protein deficient in any way?
Right.
For me, it depends on the tone of voice the person uses. It's like, if they're genuinely curious versus there's like a subtext of, I don't know, like attitude in it, I may say, well, and it's also an educational moment, regardless of their tone. Where do the animals that you eat get their protein? I get my protein from the same places they do, from plants. Right?
Very good answer. I'm pretty much in the same line. I usually have to pause first before I answer because it's like, here's that question again. Here's that question again. Right. But kind of same thing for me. I'm kind of like, well, protein is not the biggest thing you have to worry about. It is a teachable moment, like you said. So I normally will give them examples, of where you can actually get it from. Because some folks, it's like little kids. You answer one question and it just leads to another question.
Why?
So why? Well, how? But what I basically do is, even if they ask about protein, is really talk about like what the balance, and I don't like to call it diet, but the balanced way we eat looks like, because some of the things folks may not like people say, oh my gosh, I don't like beans, for example. Okay, well, what do you do in these other areas? So I try to make folks understand, I don't really get the protein question. What I get is, what do you eat? Just in general, what do you eat? Like, you just eat salad. Like, no. It's like, it's more to life than salads. But it is a great way to educate folks because, again, I was that person. I thought that everybody was vegan, only ate salad. And then the people I saw, they didn't look that great to me. They looked like they needed to eat. That was my perception of it.
And they didn't look like us
right,
either.
exactly. And they didn't look like me either, which was the other thing. So I was like, okay, well, I don't want to look like that, and that's not for me. So now it's an opportunity to like share recipes and talk to folks about, well, these are the different things you can eat, and what do you currently like now? Let's talk about how maybe we can sub that. So yeah, I don't really get the protein, but I always just get like, what do you eat? But it's a great time to talk about all of the food options, and then people get amazed. They go, well, oh my goodness, I didn't know XYZ, and it's like, oh, well, wow, and I figure the door is open then. It's like the whole campaign starts at that point. But yeah, and then it's like KR mentioned before, just having that patience. I do agree with you that there are people who will ask things, and there is some snarkiness to it. Sometimes it's like, really like, and I'll give this really short story really quickly. So I went to, it was some type of wellness festival or something that happened at the Met. And there was a business there, a vendor who had a table, and they were marketing these B12 injections. And you guys have probably seen it. They come to your home, they set it up, looks like an IV, you pay for this service, which was really great. But this is what she said to me when I approached the table. So I'm reading the information. She says, oh, wow, this is really great for you. And how do you eat? So, of course, I'm like, well, I'm vegan. I'm always happy to say that. And she says, well, I'm quite sure you need this. I know you're deficient. Now, if I'd been earlier in, maybe early in my journey, I don't know how I would have responded. But the interesting thing is that the week before I went to that wellness festival, I just had complete blood work done. Everything was amazing. I'm not deficient in anything. So I asked her, well, what would make you think that? And of course, the answer was because you don't eat meat. And it was just a good moment for me to realize that even people in the professions are not fully educated. They're not informed, you know, and then you also have to realize the angle that they're coming from. She's trying to market this product. There is the rumor out there that people who don't eat meat are automatically deficient. And, you know, it's like you were saying, some things are genetics. We're going to have things to happen. That's the other thing that we really need to get clear. You know, I've had someone say to me, well, veganism is not the end-all, be-all. Well, it's not, but it's pretty close. It's pretty close, you know, and I let people kind of do whatever they want to do. But yeah, I thought that was amazing that someone just automatically assumed that I was deficient just because I said I'm vegan. She's like, you got to have this because I know you're deficient. It's like, wow, that was really amazing.
I do want to add to that, though, that your B and your D are something you should watch as being vegan. D for everybody that lives in the Northeast, not because you're vegan. We just don't get as much sun, and you know, our cars have the tint, and we're wearing sunscreen, and so we're not getting as much sun even in the summertime. So D is something you should have your doctor check. And B, because we don't eat meat, there is a possibility that it could be lower, but it's not for everybody, and it's something that dissipates over time. So maybe a year after you're vegan, it won't be deficient, but maybe in 10 years, maybe it would be deficient, and it's a very easy fix. It's not like life-threatening if you're getting your blood work done or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah, just to go off of that, like it's really kind of amazing and frustrating how, you know, all these academies of you know, like dietitians and nutritionists and all these things, they are taught a very specific curriculum that includes meat. And I mean, man, we could really go into it, but you know.
And it's not even a whole class. It's like a piece of a class that your doctor takes. It's not even a whole class.
Full nutrition.
Yeah, I mean, doctors, they don't even get trained in nutrition, period, if anything. But yeah, I mean, even these, like, you know, specifically nutritionist, dietitian schools and, you know, degrees, they're taught a specific curriculum. And I mean, that really, like, goes into, like, you know, the education system, you know, the whiteness of the education system, who this education system is catered towards. So, you know, it's like coming in and, like, bringing that education, or really, like, unlearning is what I like to call it. You know, people in the United States are not protein deficient, we're fiber deficient. So what does that tell us? You know, and on top of that, you know, just bringing in like how to, when you're talking to your own communities, and especially, you know, with communities of color, like, we're also very detached from the fact that, like, historically we have eaten plant-based diets. And so it's just like this huge, again, bringing in the education system, you know, there's so many things that we've been taught that is wrong. It's the wrong history. So really, like, unlearning that is important. And again, being very gentle with these things and easing people into it, because it's a lot. It's a lot to tell people that everything that you've been told is a lie. So.
And then I want to add one thing, Deanna, to that too, is helping people to understand that going vegan doesn't mean you're losing things. That's another thing that people say. I feel like I'm giving up, not just the food, but we're talking about social aspects as well. You know, and a lot of people don't think about that, is that, okay, if I start eating a certain way, like you said, you know, you have family dynamics, you have dating dynamics, this, what happens when I go out, you know, and I'm with my friends. I know for me, when I used to go out with certain people, this was a few years back, and whenever the waiter would come up, I could just see everybody at the table like, oh my God, here we go. Like, you know, they've already ordered. I'm like, give me a couple of minutes. I wind up spending a bunch of money on sides. I'm like, really? Like, this is what you're offering, you know? But then I had to get to the point to where I value myself more than how I valued other people around me. I know that doesn't sound really nice, but it's the truth. You know, I had to get to the point to where, like, this is my life, this is my health, this is more important to me. I can't worry about if someone's a little annoyed because it's taking me X amount of minutes, and now I'm super annoying. Like, it's to the point to where, you know, I walk in a place and they go, well, oh, we have fries or whatever. I'm like, yes, but you don't have separate kitchen equipment, right? You're still cooking those fries in the same grease. Okay, so I don't want it. So people are like, oh my gosh, you're just difficult. But it's the value that I've placed on myself, the value that I've placed on my life. And like you were saying, with marginalized communities, communities of color, there's already this underlying feeling that I'm not worth. I don't mean anything. I'm always the one that gets less than. So it's for folks who need to kind of, if we can raise that vibration in terms of how you view yourself first. I know for me, that's what makes veganism so possible for me. Do I still like the way chicken smells? Yes, I do. We were out walking somewhere, I smelled barbecue. I'm like, oh my God. I mean, I knew it wasn't tofu when I smelled it. I knew what that was. You know what I mean? I'm just saying, you don't forget. And that's the other thing, is like not painting, people ask questions. I try to give people the truth. We can't paint this like, you're not a human being, you're gonna somehow forget everything because you go vegan, you're never gonna crave anything. To me, that's setting people up for failure. You know what I mean? But what it is that being able to give the benefit. You're not gonna lose, you're gonna gain. Like you said, somebody wanting to lose a few pounds. Well, that leads to higher self-esteem, which means that, okay, if this is working, let me learn what else works for me. And now you have a person who's totally redesigned their lifestyle. And to me, that's what's most important, and I definitely get it. Going places, taking your own food, for example, that can be rough, because you go some places and people are like, oh, that's offensive because you're not eating my food. You don't like me, you know what I mean? And people just don't realize how many ties, mentally and emotionally and physically, that we have to food. And so that's another thing, I should have maybe thrown that out with the challenges, is that understanding that it's not just about swapping out what's on your plate, it's going to affect every other aspect of your life. So you really, really, you have to think about that. I think the good part for me is that I made cooler friends. Because some of my friends are like, I can't hang out with you. You don't eat normally. Like that really happens.
I was going to say that I've noted, in the last 6 years, I've lost people, and I don't mourn it. I wish them luck, but I'm doing what's best for me, and it's okay that that's not where they are right now.
Correct.
And if they ever called, picked up the phone and said, hey, I have high blood pressure and I need your help, I would more than willing help them. And I also want to say veganism is different for everyone. She said that she doesn't want to eat in places that don't have separate fryers. For me, that's not an issue. I understand what it is, but if I go out with friends, which very rarely happens anymore, and the place only has fries and salad, I'm gonna have fries and salad. It sounded like you wouldn't have done that. And
Not the
it's
fries.
different, right? And it's different for
Right.
everyone, and that choice is yours. But I know that I'm also not harming animals, and she's not harming animals. It's what you want to do. So you have to make your veganism your own.
Your own, correct.
I think sometimes we feel like we're imposing whether it's at a restaurant, whether it's at a friend's house, whether it's a work event, that we're imposing by saying, I only eat, plant-based foods. And whenever that feeling will come up, at least in the beginning, I put myself in the shoes of, what if I actually had a severe allergy? Would I feel like I was imposing? Well, maybe, but then the respect, I think, for actual health issues. If your doctor has said you can't eat this anymore or you're going to get severely sick, that mental, if you have to play a little mind game with yourself to kind of anchor in the conviction to be able to respectfully expect others to respect you in terms of what your choices are, to just whatever that mental kind of conversation to have with yourself to get yourself to the point where you feel empowered to expect and ask for what you want. And it's not imposing. Yeah.
Absolutely. And on the heels of all of this, some people may respond, but we're made to eat animals. How do you then respond to that kind of statement?
I actually have shortened what I say because that answer could get pretty ugly.
Yep.
I tell them to go to Instagram and look up the hashtag decolonize your diet. And none of us were meant to eat meat. Meat became what people ate when they arrived or became rich or had money, and then it trickled down to the rest of us once they could mass produce it and shoot it with antibiotics and give it to us. So no, none of us were meant to eat meat.
Anyone want to add to that?
Do you want to?
I'm waiting for your answer. I want to hear what you
That's
got.
the idea. Like, let her go first.
It depends on. Again, I really like your point about the tone of like the protein question, because I think with this one it's very similar too. It's is this coming from a religious place? Is this coming from like arrogance, you know, where is it coming from? And I try to ask people questions, like not even just with veganism, but just in general. I'm like, so like, why do you think that? You know, and just kind of get them to get to their own answers and think about things a little bit more deeper on their own, because then it feels more like
Organic.
or organic, and they have ownership over their own thought processes, and that's how it should be. But yeah, I don't know, my ethics when it comes to eating animals has really changed over the 4 years that I've been vegan. And that's because I have connected with and work a lot with indigenous people and indigenous vegans. And indigenous veganism sometimes looks very different than just plainly not consuming animal products whatsoever. And sometimes that causes a lot of arguments, right? So I think, I don't know, it depends on who I'm talking to. Because if I'm talking to a white person who asks me that question, I don't really have that conversation very often anymore, to be honest. Just because it really is coming from a place of ignorance, and I don't even think that they realize it, but it's also coming from a place of power. There's a great, I actually have this here, there's a great piece in here, as well as on the Food Empowerment Project's website, foodispower.org, about the colonization of food in the Americas. And you know, it highlights what was said before about how a lot of the animals, actually, I'm not even gonna say a lot, most of the animals that we eat today, they were brought here by Europeans. So in some ways, yes, there are some animals that like we never ate here in these lands. And then, you know, we have, but then, you know, also we have the diaspora, right? So like this, we are such a melting pot. I kind of hate that term, but we are really such a melting pot of like, you know, stories and histories. And so I think it's just important to like ground ourselves in that first and our relationship to land. I think that's missing a lot from just animal rights and discussion about the ethics of animals a lot in like mainstream vegan and animal rights spaces. You know, we're talking about like how we relate to other living beings, but like we don't always talk about how we're relating to like this living being that we're on, right? That I think is, to me, what I've realized is the root of every single issue is relationship to land. So really starting from there, right? And that can be painful for communities of color, because a lot of us, we've been traumatized. You know, we're carrying that historical trauma, so it's a lot to ask of people to start thinking about that. It helps to do it in community and in healing spaces. But you know, when talking to like a white person asking that question, there's also some healing that needs to happen there, but you know, it's usually like there's a lot that needs to be unpacked when it comes to understanding, you know, how you relate to this land, how you got to this land, and how you're going to relate to other animals. And I don't know if that answered the question, but these are just things that I think need to be thought about more, you know, when we are even attempting to answer some of these questions. So
I think too, thank you for introducing it, because I do want to say a little bit about that. So I also think too, especially with communities of color, I think that's part of, I don't want to say the problem, but one of the challenges that we have when we talk about land, because, you know, we feel disconnected from the land. You know, we don't feel like there's any ownership, even though there is, but we don't feel like we're a part of it. So anything that you don't feel like you're a part of course you're going to stand back from it. Even if someone's trying to invite you into that space, you're not going to feel comfortable just walking through that door. So it's like, you know, when I was growing up, and I guess that was the last generation, you know, my grandparents, you know, picked things from the ground, you know, for us to eat, you know, but then like Kiara said, because of the trauma sometimes, when you think about going into modern day communities of color and you talk about picking something, it's like, wait a minute, that's not exactly, that's not comfortable. So a lot of folks are, are kind of, there's been a disconnect, there's a divorce there between the land and the communities and people being able to feel like, okay, this belongs to me and everything that's here nurtures me. I'm part of that. I'm always telling people that we're of the earth, and people don't get that, like, well, how? No, I'm a human. I get that, but we're of the earth. And so if you think about what the earth does for you, the earth nurtures us. The soil, well, before they started tampering with it like they did, that's a different story. The soil has all the vitamins and the minerals and everything that we need in it. So of course, anything that you grow from the soil is going to nurture your body. So it's also getting people to go back to that. But again, that's a healing space because there's so much trauma, there's so much negativity that's associated with that for all folks. Let me just say that, for everybody. So I think that's the other piece too that I just wanted to mention. So I love in Philly how we have the community gardens, for example, and they're always wanting people to come and volunteer and tend these gardens. But I do believe that that's part of why maybe sometimes you don't see as much representation because people feel like, well, that doesn't belong to me, or the only, information or recollection I have of relationship to land is something that is traumatizing. So that, there's other folks that maybe can help people do that work so that we can start to embrace the fact that we can heal ourselves by growing our own food from our own land. And that really has to be, I think, a process to kind of get that whole, get the whole idea started. Because anybody can just go in Whole Foods and buy some stuff mindlessly. I do it all the time. Have my shopping list, like, okay, but can I always say that there's a true connection? Like, am I always thinking about land? I don't think we are all the time. But like I said, I think there's a reason because there has been such a disconnect there. When in actuality, that could be part of how folks can introduce this plant-based lifestyle into their homes by simply planting some things around their home or even, on your windowsill or whatever. So I do think that's something that we have to reclaim, which is that connection to earth. I think that's important.
Running really long time, but Hadi, I want to make sure you have a moment to share on this.
I was just going to say, so if you're in a moment, a conversation where you can't address some of those deeper issues about we were meant to eat meat, I think just going there with the person, okay, well, if you believe that, what would that have looked like, a couple hundred years ago, eating meat? Was it 3 times a day? No, it wasn't. It was every couple weeks, maybe, right? So it's like, well, do you think that the way that meat consumption is now represents how it was historically? No, it doesn't. So it's not, I think a lot of times the conversation can be very polarizing where it's one extreme or the other in their minds, and even in a lot of vegans' minds, I think it's you're either this or that, and it's like, well, no one's saying no one's trying to take all of your meat away from you, but if you believe that you're supposed to be eating meat, do you think the way you're eating meat now represents how we're supposed to be eating meat and how often we're supposed to be eating meat? And if that means that you reconsider and maybe reduce the amount of animal that you're consuming, that's in line with, that historical reference. So I think kind of on that point, unless you have time and space to really go into some of the deeper issues, if someone is stuck on thinking that we're entitled as human beings to be eating meat, well, then take them there, back to the origins of meat eating, which does not look anything like what it does today.
I'm thankful that you all really touched on that whole idea of, is veganism like an elitist approach to eating or a space of privilege? Because that was a question I hoped we'd have time to get to and add more to. So if you are interested in that question, all of our panelists will be here for a few bit longer, and I'm sure would be happy to share their ideas on that topic with you. But we have another cooking demonstration before we finish today, so I want to make sure we have a few minutes to go learn how to make some pesto. And please help me thank everyone, all of our panelists, for sharing with us.
I feel privileged.